It me. Hello. I am here in the woods. I have stopped to water a flower that I picked that I was going to press, but I didn't want it to wilt before I got back home. And I thought it'd be a good time to make a video since I was out in nature amidst the trees. Many of the sages of old would go to sacred places in the forest and pray. And I like to do that. I feel like if you are quiet, the trees will whisper to you and calm thy spirit. So after the tornado, I was reminded of a story that I had been reminded of recently about Jesus calming the storm, and in another account around that time walking on water. And when I was reminded of this story, I just kept thinking about how funny it is that over and over again, Jesus would refer to his disciples as slow and dull. And it's not hard to see why when you think about this story. So at one point after Jesus had fed the crowd of 5,000 with the loaves and fishes, the disciples were with Jesus out at sea, and a furious storm came and was rocking the boat, and they were afraid it was going to be capsized by the waves. And Jesus was down in the stern asleep. And so they went and woke him up, and he was like, "Why are you waking me up?" And they were like, "Oh my God, there's a terrible storm. Aren't you afraid? Like, why are you gonna let us drown? Like, do something about this." So he came up and he rebuked the winds and said, calm, peace. And then there was peace and calm. And then later, when they were on the way back across the Sea of Galilee again, Jesus had stayed behind to pray on top of the mountain alone. And so they went back to where they came from without him. He was going to catch up later. Well, again, they were caught in a crazy windstorm, and they were really afraid that they would again be blown over, capsized. And they saw coming from a few kilometers away someone just walking on the water, and Peter yelled out, "If you're Jesus, then come and let us see," or something. And then he said, "You come here and meet me." So Peter got out of the water and was also walking on water, and then his fear overtook him, and that's when he began to sink. And so Jesus came and lifted him up and carried him to the boat, and then they got on with their journey. But the lesson I was struck with was how easily you forget who is in the boat with you. I mean, they'd seen all of these miracles play out, and they were still afraid that they were going to be taken down. And so many times life brings a storm, and the storm represents the challenges and the obstacles and the frightful things that happen in the world that make us fear that we are going to be taken down. And the water represents our emotions, and beneath the water, the abyss of the unknown. And when the seas are raging, that means that we are overwhelmed by an emotional situation, and we fear that it will drown us. And the truth is that we have to seek shelter in the storm in the thing that is constant and sacred and holy, and find inner peace within us. And it was interesting because when the tornado was happening, I was awoken randomly from my sleep. This was right before it kind of struck. And I woke up and it started lightning a lot, and I could see it through my blinds, and I looked outside and it looked all weird and tornado-y and all like weird yellowy, stormy. And this was in the middle of the night. This was about like 12:45 or 1. And then it started getting really windy, and then the wind started to pick up like crazy, and I was like, oh, maybe I should get dressed and go downstairs. And it's weird because that night I had laid my clothes out on the bed in case I had to suddenly get up and get dressed in an emergency, which is weird but not. And I got dressed and went downstairs and looked out the back doors, and the trees, I thought the trees in the forest were gonna snap because they were all going like this. Like I was like, this is crazy. There's not gonna be a tree left standing when this is over. I was like, is there a tornado happening? Like, what is this? Pressing stop by accident. And so right at the time that I thought, is this a tornado? My friend Jared texted me and he was like, are you okay? A tornado just passed your house. And I was like, yeah, I was wondering what that was. Like, apparently it was a tornado, and I didn't know how severe it was, but then everything got really calm and really quiet, like crazy quiet. And then all of a sudden there was like emergency sirens, like tens and tens of them, and they were, you know, swarming my neighborhood. And so the next day I went on a walk to see what was going on, and the street next to us looked like a bomb had dropped. I mean, there was like one cul-de-sac in particular that was like kind of right behind the woods that are connected to my house that was like completely like blocked by all the trees that had fallen, and that whole area of the woods were just like all the trees were snapped. And then like right up the street from that, like kind of directly behind my house, there was like a whole cul-de-sac that had been leveled. Like none of the houses were left, and they were leveled completely to the ground. And I just was struck by the fact that my house was really at a bird's eye view directly in the path of this tornado, and it had just shifted ever so slightly on its course so that it had missed our whole street. And like my recycling can lid blew open and not even a single piece of trash had blown out of it. And we have a dead tree over our driveway that's really fragile, and sometimes a bunch of branches will fall if the wind's blowing really hard, and we didn't even have a twig on the ground. And I was, during it all, when I wasn't quite sure what was happening, and I was just looking, thinking like, there's gonna be no trees left in our backyard, I was struck with how calm I was through the whole thing, and kind of matter of fact. Like, it was scary, it was a scary situation, but I wasn't that afraid because I remembered the story, and I remembered who was in the boat with me. And I just knew that lest the Lord keep your house, your labor is in vain. And that, you know, we have to do our due diligence to be responsible and wise, but all of our efforts are in vain if it's our time to die. So I thought, well, there's nowhere to really take cover in my house. We have a little bathroom in the middle, but it's right under like a soft spot in the floor where there's been leaks. So I was like, well, I could be in there, but then the tub over my head could fall on me. So I'm pretty much just fucked if I'm gonna be. So I was just sort of like looking out the window, and yeah, I just thought, well, I'm either gonna die or I'm not. And I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. I don't think I'm gonna die in a storm, so I've been in a lot of tornadoes, and I haven't really been that afraid because that's just not the way I'm gonna go, I don't think. And also when I'm in an airplane and there's a lot of turbulence, I'm never scared of that because I just know for sure I'm not gonna die in a plane crash. Knock on wood. I don't wanna challenge God or anything. But yeah, it's crazy when you can stop and remind yourself that your steps are ordered, and things like your death and like big things like that are timed and ordered, and nothing will change that. It's fated, it's destiny. And if your day does come, there may not be anything you can do about it, and maybe you can. I would always say pray for protection. But I think radical acceptance is the key. And yeah, I mean, times get frightening, but when you are frightened, just like Peter, that's when you sink. And when you maintain faith, that's when you can be lifted up and safe, no matter what's going on. We can walk on water as well, but we can't have fear. And when you have more faith in your faith than you have faith in fear, it invites blessings into your life. And when you're consumed with fear and that's what you're serving, then it invites frightful things into your life. In secular culture, it's described as the law of attraction or the law of vibration. And whatever is the deepest truth about you, whatever you're omitting from your heart, from your energy field, from your soul, that's kind of like the order that you're putting in from the universe, which the universe is just the physical manifestation of divine. It's just one of the aspects of God in the way that he is manifest in reality. So, yeah, searching my mind for final thoughts. But when you get afraid, just remember who's in the boat with you, and remember that when Peter was full of faith and certainty, he could also walk on water. And when he was overcome by fear, that's when he sank. So if you're afraid, then speak it, tell God about it, write about it, write it out in your journal, do some automatic writing, and put words to it, draw a picture, draw what the feelings look like, is what Kim Kranz had led a little workshop online recently about draw the feeling, which was really neat. When I heard about that, I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I mean, you know, in prayer, you just have to be naked and be honest, because you can't hide anyway. So be real and authentic, and the more that you get those fears and worries off of your chest, the more you're laying down that burden, and the lighter you will feel, and the more you can digest them and feel uplifted. Something in Job 22, it talks about you are lifted up by the cleanness of your hands, but the verse goes on to talk about how, you know, when you're under the clouds, like you're disconnected from God, and God's always there, but we have to connect. It's like he's always the electricity, but we have to plug into the socket. And what allows us to plug into that socket is being lifted up in faith and joy and thanksgiving, and knowing that everything is going to work out in your highest good, and that God is in control even during the darkest times. And you know, death is very upsetting and it's very tragic to us humans on earth, but it's a natural part of being alive, and everyone is going to die at some point. Like when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, I think he made the point that Lazarus is going to die again someday, you know, and maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will happen. And the more you can make peace with that, the less you will be afraid. So I hope that everyone is well. I'm praying for the world. I'm praying for everyone's health and safety and provision during these scary times. And even though times are scary around us, we do not have to be afraid. Bye!